The Pacific in 1944 was not the ocean the sailors had grown up imagining. It no longer shimmered with postcards and dreams. It had teeth now, invisible and patient. And on a quiet evening in August, under a copper-colored sky, those teeth were waiting. The USS Artemis, a mid-class Navy supply ship, cut through the swells at a weary pace. Her steel sides bore the salt scars of too many runs, Guadalcanal, the Solomons, and now this nameless stretch of water halfway between islands nobody could pronounce. The men called it the sea that forgot its gentle ways. Down in the mess, laughter had thinned. Cigarettes hung from lips but barely burned. There were rumors, whispers of submarines that moved like phantoms, of convoys vanished without a trace. The war had dragged too long, even courage was beginning to rust. Captain Elias Ward, 51 and quiet as a prayer, stood on deck watching the horizon darken. He had been to sea since before some of his men were born, but he had never seen a dusk so still. No gulls. No wind. Only the breathing of the sea, deep, slow, and too calm. He touched the railing absently, feeling its chill. "Sir?" came a young voice beside him. It was Ensign Calhoun, barely 20. "Message came through, storm building west by southwest. They suggest we adjust course." Ward looked toward the faint orange smudge of sunset. "A storm's a storm. We've survived worse." But as the night thickened, the horizon seemed to swallow its own color. Somewhere below, in the black cathedral of the ocean, something moved. At 23:47 hours, without warning, a deep sound rose from beneath the hull, a sound like the world exhaling. Then came the explosion. The ship lurched upward, twisted, and the deck buckled. Fire bloomed along the port side, painting the sea in flame. The Artemis screamed, steel, rivets, men, all one terrible note. In the chaos, orders dissolved into instincts. Men ran, stumbled, leapt into the burning water. The radio went dead. The lights failed. The captain's last sight of his ship was of her bow lifting toward the stars before she broke in half, groaning like a wounded whale. The ocean, so calm moments before, now boiled with oil and screams. Ward surfaced amid wreckage, his eyes stinging with salt and smoke. Around him, fragments of his ship floated like bones, planks, barrels, a torn life raft. And men. Always men. By dawn, the sea had quieted again. The fire had drifted away toward the horizon, and what remained were 23 sailors clinging to whatever would float. The captain, shivering and half-blind, pulled himself onto a piece of shattered decking. The water lapped at his legs, warm and endless. He whispered to no one in particular. "Hold together, boys. The sea gives and the sea takes, but maybe tonight she'll remember mercy." And as the sun rose, pale and indifferent, the men realized the truth that would define the next 5 days. No one knew they were alive. No one was coming. And that was only the first morning. The morning after the sinking was cruelly beautiful. The ocean glittered with deceptive calm, the kind of calm that mocks. Captain Ward gathered whoever he could find, 19 men, scattered across bits of flotsam and one half-deflated raft. Faces pale, lips cracked, eyes ringed with disbelief. They counted supplies. A few tins of biscuits. 2 canteens. A small emergency radio that refused to speak. A flare gun with 1 round. Ward's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "We ration everything," he said. "Half sips of water, no food yet. We stay close. Someone will notice our absence." He didn't tell them what he knew, that their route had been classified, their schedule secret. No one expected them for another 4 days. The sea beneath them shifted. Sunlight glimmered through the oil slicks, and shapes moved in that light. Smooth, slow circling. "Sir?" whispered Calhoun. "Look there!" A dorsal fin. Then another. Then 3. The sharks had come early. The men grew quiet. The water around them thickened with tension. The captain knew the ocean's moods, and this was not curiosity. It was hunger learning patience. By noon, the heat became unbearable. The smell of oil and burned flesh clung to their throats. Some men began to drift, talking to ghosts, seeing mirages. Ward kept his eyes on the horizon. In all directions, only blue. Too much blue. When night returned, the stars appeared cruelly sharp. One by one, the men began to pray, not for rescue, but for another sunrise. And as the dark deepened, something brushed against the captain's leg. Smooth, deliberate, alive. He didn't flinch. He just whispered to the night, 5 days. We'll hold 5 days. By the second dawn, the sea looked like glass, smooth, endless, treacherously calm. The men floated in scattered clusters, each bound together by ropes of debris and the fragile thread of hope. No one spoke much anymore. Voices were low, as if afraid of waking something beneath. The ocean had begun to whisper, not with words, but with movements. A brush here, a swirl there, a ripple that didn't belong to the wind. The sharks had learned patience. They came and went, shadows circling in the deep, brushing against dangling feet. Sometimes, one would rise close enough for its dorsal fin to slice the water's surface like a slow, silent blade. By mid-morning, the first man vanished. Private Hensley had been quiet since sunrise, eyes glassy, mumbling about his wife's blueberry pie. He slipped off the wreckage without a sound, just a faint splash, followed by a dark smear beneath the waves. No one dared look long enough to confirm what they already knew. Captain Ward didn't call his name. He just closed his eyes and said softly, "God keep him." The sun climbed higher, burning the oil off the surface, cooking the salt into their skin. Lips split, eyes swelled, and the water, so vast, so full, mocked their thirst. The youngest, Calhoun, tried to collect rain from the air itself, holding his palms up to the empty sky. By late afternoon, hallucinations began to drift among them like invisible fog. Some swore they saw an island just over the horizon, green, fertile, impossible. Others claimed to hear music beneath the waves, soft, orchestral, like a radio from a drowned ballroom. Ward knew these were the sea's tricks. The ocean, when it couldn't kill a man quickly, preferred to confuse him first. As dusk fell, they huddled closer. The world shrank to the sound of water and breath. Somewhere far off, a fin broke the surface, a black silhouette against the molten sky. The captain murmured, "Stay still. They're watching. They only strike at the flailing." That night, under a dome of unblinking stars, the water stirred again. Then came the scream. It was sharp, brief, and then silence. When they looked toward where it came from, only bubbles remained. The men clutched each other, trembling, whispering prayers and curses alike. Calhoun began to sob quietly, his breath shallow. "We can't last like this," he said. "No one can." Ward placed a hand on his shoulder, rough but steady. "Then we make ourselves the exception," he whispered. "Until the sea forgets we're here." As the night deepened, the water around them began to glow faintly, bioluminescence stirred by movement, like stars reflected beneath them. The ocean shimmered with the light of unseen life. It was beautiful and terrible. The sea was alive, and it was watching. By the third day, reason had become fragile. The survivors floated half awake in a feverish limbo between dreams and delirium. Saltwater blisters had split their skin, the taste of brine lived on their tongues. Their eyes, once sharp with youth, had turned a strange, glassy gray, like the sea itself had claimed them piece by piece. The sun climbed without compassion. It turned the water into a mirror and the men into shadows. Captain Ward could barely lift his arm anymore. Still, he kept count, whispering names under his breath every hour to remind himself who was left. 19, he murmured that morning. 19 alive! By midday, 2 more were gone. One from drinking seawater. Another from despair. The body of the second man drifted too close. Something below brushed it once, twice, and then it disappeared beneath the surface in a sudden whirl of foam. A few men began to laugh, sharp, cracking laughter that echoed too long. The captain let them. It was better than screaming. When evening came, the sea changed color, from blue to violet, from violet to black. And with it came rain. At first, the men stared in disbelief. Then they lifted their faces, mouths open, tongues out. The rain tasted like salvation, clean, cold, merciful. They drank until they choked, and for the first time in days some of them wept without shame. Ward filled one canteen. He passed it around carefully, like communion. When it came back to him, he didn't drink. He simply held it and whispered, "A gift from God, or the sea's apology." That night, they tied themselves together with strips of rope and cloth, afraid that sleep might separate them forever. The stars flickered faintly through the clouds, and for a brief moment, silence felt almost kind again. But then, from somewhere in the dark water, came a new sound, not the distant churn of fins, but a deep, rhythmic hum. Calhoun lifted his head weakly. "Engines?" Ward listened. The sound was faint, like a heartbeat through stone. He turned toward the horizon and whispered, "Maybe. Or maybe the sea's heartbeat." They stayed awake all night, listening. When dawn came, the sound was gone. All that remained was the ocean, empty, endless, and hungry. The fourth day arrived without dawn. There was only the gradual graying of the sky, as if light had forgotten how to begin again. The survivors drifted together in a loose ring of wreckage. Their world had shrunk to the size of a small room, a floating, shifting room without walls or mercy. The sea was oddly still. No wind. No gulls. Just the quiet lap of waves against metal and bone. Captain Ward was no longer sure when he had last slept. Dreams and reality had begun to blend into one continuous haze, the way sunlight blends into the ocean when both are too bright to stare at. Around midday, the hallucinations began again. One man swore he saw a rescue ship approaching, tall, gray, draped with flags. He tried to swim toward it. They pulled him back, but his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, glassy with conviction. "It's real," he kept saying. "She's here for us." Another started reciting hymns, his voice trembling. Each word drifted out across the water like the fading echo of church bells. And then, as if the sea were listening, the surface rippled, small circles expanding outward, slow, deliberate. Fins broke the water again. The sharks had returned, not curious now, but confident. They had learned that daylight brought hunger. The men froze. The sound of breathing became the only movement. One of the younger sailors whispered, "Why don't they finish it? Why circle us so?" Captain Ward, lips cracked and eyes dim, said quietly, "Because the sea doesn't kill out of rage. It kills out of rhythm." They watched as the shadows drifted closer, then sank again. One fin brushed the surface so near the captain that he could have touched it if he'd dared. By evening, the water turned black once more. The stars reflected across it like shattered glass, scattered and broken. Calhoun, shivering, looked up and whispered, "The stars look closer tonight." Ward didn't answer. He only stared at the sky, remembering his wife's face the night he left, how her eyes had held the same quiet light. He thought of her voice saying, "The sea doesn't keep what it loves, He wondered now if she'd been right. When midnight came, the stars began to fade, one by one. Clouds rolled in, erasing the constellations until even the heavens were gone. The men floated in darkness so complete that it felt physical, a pressure, a weight. Some began to hum softly, to fill the silence with something human. The sound trembled across the waves like the ghost of a lullaby. Ward whispered to himself, "If the stars can die, so can fear." Then he closed his eyes, and for the first time since the sinking, he slept. He woke to the sound of rain. Gentle, rhythmic, almost kind. Droplets tapped the broken wood and the torn rubber of the raft, soft as fingers on glass. For a brief moment, the world smelled clean again, like the edge of a memory. Ward let the rain wash over his face, washing away salt, blood, and nightmare. He opened his mouth, tasting it, cool, sweet, real. When the others stirred, he passed them handfuls of water cupped from the air. It wasn't much, but it was enough to wake the embers of will inside them. As the morning light rose, they began to see shapes on the horizon, not ships, not land, but clouds of black smoke, faint and distant. A battle, perhaps. Or a ship burning elsewhere. Ward stared for a long time. "Someone's fighting out there," he murmured. "And where there's fighting, there's someone to find us." Calhoun managed a weak smile. "Maybe they'll finish the fight and come back for us." Ward didn't say what he was thinking, that by the time anyone returned, the sea would have finished them first. The rain faded. The heat returned. The ocean began to stir again. Around noon, one of the men, Sergeant Grady, began to speak in a strange, steady voice. He claimed he could hear the ocean talking. "She says she's tired of holding us," he whispered. "Says we don't belong here anymore." The others laughed nervously. But then the water moved. A large swell rolled beneath them, not from wind, not from tide. Something vast had passed below. The raft tilted. A barrel spun away. A man screamed as something caught his leg. Blood bloomed in the water like ink and paper. The sea erupted. For a brief, awful moment, the world was all splashing limbs and red foam. Then silence again. Only 14 men remained. The captain closed his eyes. He whispered, not to God this time, but to the sea itself. 5 days, you promised me 5. The ocean gave no answer. Only a slow, rhythmic swell, as if breathing. That night, the rain returned, thin and cold. The men huddled together, half asleep, half dead. Ward lay awake, staring at the black sky. He thought of the sea as a woman, patient, beautiful, and cruelly constant. He wondered if she pitied them. At some point before dawn, he heard Calhoun's voice, faint and distant. "Captain, what if the sea forgives?" Ward didn't reply. He simply stared into the horizon, where the night and water met, and waited for forgiveness that never came. When dawn came, it was not gold or red but silver. A thin, metallic light that seemed to come not from the sun, but from the sea itself. The survivors, 10 now, floated in silence. Their faces were hollow, their lips pale and cracked like old paper. The sea around them was strangely calm, glassy and reflective, as though it too had grown weary of movement. Captain Ward's mind wandered between waking and dream. He thought he saw the faces of those already gone, drifting just beneath the surface, their eyes open, their expressions peaceful, as if the sea had rocked them to sleep. Calhoun stirred beside him. His voice was hoarse, almost childlike. "Captain, do you think they'll find us today?" Ward didn't answer right away. He was watching the horizon, where a faint shimmer danced, the kind of mirage born from thirst and longing. But something about it was different. It didn't fade when he blinked. "I don't know," he said at last. "But I think the sea's done with us." The words hung in the air, quiet and heavy. They spent the morning in stillness, conserving what little strength they had. Every sound became enormous. The slap of a wave, the groan of wood, the far-off cry of a bird they could not see. A bird. Calhoun lifted his head sharply. "Did you hear that?" Ward nodded. "Land birds don't fly this far." They began scanning the sky. At first, nothing. Then there, a small, dark speck circling high above. The men began to murmur, too afraid to hope, too tired to stop it. Then, as if summoned by their whispering, the wind changed. A faint breeze carried a smell, faint, but unmistakable, earth. For hours they drifted, hearts thudding weakly, eyes fixed on the growing line ahead, a pale smudge where blue met blue. It wasn't a mirage. It was real. An island, small and green and shining in the late sun. Ward stared for a long time, then smiled, a slow, broken smile. "She forgave us," he said softly. "The sea let us go." But the ocean was not done with its ritual of mercy and cruelty. As they began to paddle with shattered planks and bleeding hands, dark shapes followed. The sharks, silent, loyal in their patience. One man slipped from exhaustion. The sea claimed him without sound. Ward didn't turn. He knew by now that looking back was a kind of invitation. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, then sank again. By dusk, the island was close enough that they could see trees, hear the faint rumble of waves breaking on sand. Then, a sound. Engines. They froze. Over the horizon came the silhouette of a ship, a small patrol craft, gray against the reddening sky. For a heartbeat, no one dared speak. Then Calhoun, trembling, lifted a piece of torn fabric high into the air, waving it weakly. The ship drew closer. A voice shouted. The men could not make out the words, but they knew. Ward's head fell back. He closed his eyes. A single tear, salty as the sea itself, traced down his cheek. 5 days, he whispered. She kept her promise. They were pulled aboard just as the light died. Hands grasped them, rough, human, warm. Someone shouted for water, for blankets, for morphine. But Ward barely heard them. He lay on the deck, eyes open to the first stars reappearing above. Around him, men wept. Some prayed. Some simply stared, too stunned by the feel of solid wood beneath them. Calhoun leaned over, whispering through cracked lips. "We made it, Captain." Ward nodded faintly. "Yes, but not all of us." In the distance, the sea rolled on, silent and infinite. Its surface shimmered under starlight, calm, indifferent, eternal. The rescuers would later record that they found 9 men alive. 9 souls who had drifted for 5 days in waters where none should have survived. They never found the wreck. They never learned why it sank, nor what drew the sharks, nor why the storm had passed them by. But among the rescued, when the story was told, there was one thing they all agreed upon. On the 5th day, the sea changed. The waves grew soft. The currents gentler. It was as if the ocean herself had decided to release them, her final lullaby to those she no longer wished to keep. And so the sea remained what it had always been, vast, unknowable, merciful in her cruelty.